Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? So it's time for another question and answer session. This one, number 12. So obviously there have been ones before this, so I'm sure some of the questions and answers will cross over. But all in all, you guys asked a lot of really interesting things. Some things have never been asked before. 40 questions in total will be covered. It breaks down into 30 music related questions, one about the channel itself, and 9 personal questions. It's going to be a lot of fun here. Hopefully you guys enjoy this as well. Just to catch some people up that might be new to the channel, I am a licensed registered architect. That's the reason I wear this shirt whenever I film these types of episodes, just to have a little play off of me normally wearing my concert shirts. Obviously, big, passionate music fan. I've been collecting for over 35 years at this point, since 1989. I now have over 12,000 CDs, over 350 CD box sets, and over 300 records in my collection. And obviously, all still growing, no intention of ever stopping. We're going to dive into it here in just a bit. If you are new to the channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also, leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help. I'd greatly appreciate it. Regarding people's names, when I call them out, I will do my best to get them right. Let's go ahead and dive into this. 30 music related questions to kick things off here. And I'm going to start with a couple of them that got asked over and over and over. So just right off the top, first album I ever bought is Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction on cassette. The actual first album that it was given to me, but was Def Leppard Hysteria. I got that as a Christmas gift. But the first one that I bought, Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. Most copies of an album that I have, Def Leppard Hysteria, I have 5 of those. Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, I've also got 5 versions of that in the collection as well. And I've noticed over the years, some other bands have started to climb up that ladder too, like Great White, Hooked. I have multiple versions of that one now. But let's go ahead and dive into the questions here. Steve Auger asks, how do you keep track of your music collection? And wanted to know, do I keep a list? And I get asked this one a lot as well. But no, actually, I keep it all up in my head. I do not have a list anywhere. I did attempt to start putting things into Discogs, but after about 300 or so items, I got bored with it and stopped. And with 12,000 things to put into it, probably never going to happen. But the way that I remember things is I'm a very visual person, probably having a lot to do with the fact that I'm an architect and the way that my mind was trained when I went to college to become an architect. But I'm very visual, so I remember and recognize album covers. And it's even when I can't necessarily remember the name of the album or whatnot, I could be thumbing through something and immediately know whether I have it or I don't have it based on that. The few short times that I have actually duplicated a purchase usually has to do with the fact of it being an alternate album cover or an alternate name to the album. And so I'm going through it and I think that this is something new and I don't always remember the names of the songs. And so I'll pick it up and then I get home and find out that they released it under a different album name and album cover in some other location. But that's probably only happened about 5 times, give or take. All in all, though, yeah, that is how I remembered it. It's just all in my head. And hopefully for a very long time, I will continue to remember things like that. But maybe as I get older, I will have to create that list. All right, Alexander Finch wants to know, in the interest of preservation, have you ever considered ripping your entire collection digitally? And no, not really. To me, that would defeat the whole purpose of having the physical CD copy of it. If I were to lose all these, would I then still have the music if I had ripped copies? Well, that would be fine and dandy, except I don't really want to listen to it digitally. So if I did lose all these copies, I would want to recollect them all again. So yeah, it's never been something that has interested me to do. I do have a streaming subscription, so I have access to everything that way, so I can stream when I'm on the go. I don't have to worry about ripping my own stuff down, and that's probably part of the reason too that I've never really considered ripping any of it. All right, Beetleman wants to know, what bands do I think are overrated? And I'm sorry, Beetleman, but I think the Beatles are one of the most overrated bands. Now, I am understanding in that they were one of the first to do what they did and they're definitely the most popular band to have done that sort of stuff. They broke a lot of ground, and so I get it. You always got to remember the time and the era that the band was from and why they are so popular for what it is that they had done at that time. Not that today, any of what the Beatles did back then, nothing of that is new today, but at the time it was, and it was historical and it was groundbreaking, and I totally get that. But for me, as somebody who grew up through the 80s and 90s, that music in and of itself doesn't move me wholly the way that other stuff does. So I tend to feel like it's overrated in that regard. But I think it depends on who you're speaking to. If you're speaking to someone that grew up with it, they're never going to think that it's overrated. And I totally understand why. A lot of people will say the same thing to me. They think Guns N' Roses is overrated, but I grew up with that. And I'll say to the day that I die that I think Appetite for Destruction is the greatest rock and roll album ever. So it really just has to do with the era that you grew up with, and whether or not bands within that you find, popular or not, or whatever. Another band being the Grateful Dead, but then again, I'm just not a huge Grateful Dead fan. Those meandering jams that they do don't interest me. I kind of find them a bit boring. I don't do drugs and things. Maybe if I did and I was a deadhead in that regard, then maybe those meandering jams would be more interesting to me. But yeah, those are two bands that I've just always felt were overrated. I still have stuff of theirs in my collection. I still actually really do enjoy a lot of the Beatles stuff, but we're just talking about whether a band is overrated or not. That's who I would at least call out. All right, Lewis Carty wants to know, what do you think of classic bands that still make music today? And he kind of preferenced it with the fact that maybe they're still not making music like they used to back in, say, the first era that they came up with. And I got to say, I love all the bands that still make music today, regardless of the fact that whether it's different from their heyday or not. Dokken, Don Dokken's voice is not the same. John Bon Jovi's voice is not the same. I get it. They're never going to sound like they did from the 80s. I am okay with that. I love hearing bands grow and morph and change into what they are. For me, my fandom, my enjoyment of a band is clearly related and tied to the fact of a band continuing and still doing new stuff. Bands like Led Zeppelin that hung it up at the time that they did and have never done anything new since then, I have a hard time staying with them. I know all the classics and what it is. I don't tend to go pull out old stuff all that often, but bands that drop new stuff get me excited for that, and then I go pull out the old stuff, and so it's a constant balance between going back and listening to stuff, warming up for the new stuff, listening to the new stuff, and I enjoy that interplay a lot. So my favorite artists are the ones that are still around, still making music. Alex Laban asked, what bands do you want to have release an album that haven't for a very long time? First one that came to mind was Sabotage. Their last album, Poets and Madmen, came out in 2001, 23 years ago, but they are actually scheduled to release an album this year, Curtain Call, although they've not really given an official date. They had initially said that it would be for guitar player Chris Oliva's birthday. I don't know whether that will happen or won't happen. And Wasp, Golgotha was their last album from 2015, 9 years ago, but they are working on one, so hopefully we will see one from them. And I'd love to see something new from the Misfits. Devil's Reign came out in 2011. That's 13 years ago. Although I think what all we're going to be getting are things like Jerry Only doing a solo album, taking the place of it being under the Misfits name. I don't think Danzig will ever record with the band Misfits, so we may never see another new Misfits album. Okay, another one from Alex Laban, because he asked two here. Most memorable record store experience, and I kind of approach this from two different ways. Back in 1992, I went to a Megadeth midnight release party for their new album, Countdown to Extinction, and that was a very memorable thing. It's something that has always stuck with me ever since then, and I've got really great memories about that whole experience. But presently, basically, anytime I go to a record store with friends, you guys have seen it when I go with Anthony, those are always far more memorable to me than when I just go by myself. But I do have a few that I've done where I've gone by myself and they've been amazing days where I just made killer finds, and those stand out to me. But I think going with people and having that experience and sharing it is always going to be the most memorable. Music and Cat Lover asks, which three bands, dead or alive, should play your garden party? And I don't know what a garden party is. Is that like after my death? I'm not entirely sure, but I kind of took it to be like a celebratory type thing. And so Pink Floyd would definitely be one of them. They're my favorite band. A band that I did see, but a reunited version of the band, I'd love to see the original Doors. And a band that I have seen a couple times, and both times I've seen them, they just blew my mind. I was just gaga, and over the top for them was Rat. So I would love seeing those three bands play my garden party. Off the Record asked the question, what is your favorite box set? And so I've got some here. My favorite box sets come down to being ones that have unreleased music in them. So Bruce Springsteen released the box set Tracks, a 5 CD box set in 1998, full of nothing but unreleased material. And he's been really good at continuing things like that. So The Promise from 2010, which is based on the album Darkness on the Edge of Town, came with the album The Promise, which was 2 CDs of unreleased material. And The Ties That Bind from 2015, which is centered around the river, and it too has an album worth of unreleased material in here, plus other great stuff. So I love those. Bon Jovi did something like Bruce Springsteen called 100 or 100 Million Fans Can't Be Wrong in 2004, which is 5 CDs worth of unreleased material, or 4 CDs, I think, and 1 DVD. And then they did a deluxe edition of the New Jersey album in 2014, which featured a second disc of unreleased material, because New Jersey was originally intended to be a double album, but it was boiled down to a single disc in the end of the day. So getting things like that for me, that new unreleased material, or when I say it's new, meaning it's new to me, those are my favorite kinds of box sets. Josh Brown asks, is there a CD box set you regret not buying? And I can't really say that there are any that I regret, because I basically try to pick them up as I see them, because I know they won't stay in print or be available for long. But I didn't know this one came out at the time, so it's not really having a regret. I'm just sad that I missed it. The Cult, the demos. So I bought the Cult box set that came out that had tons and tons of unreleased material on it. I think it was called Rare Cult. And then I think through their website only, they released one called The Demos. And I didn't know about that. And I found out about it years later. And now I've been searching for one ever since, but they're astronomically priced. So I probably will never pick one of those up. Rock Collector asks, do you have any French bands in your collection? And so, yes, Trust, French metal band. I've also got this album here. So 2 things from them. Of course, if you're not familiar with who Trust are, they're the band that did the original version of Antisocial that Anthrax would later cover and have a hit with. Jean-Luc Ponty, who is a jazz fusion violinist, like his stuff a lot. I have a whole bunch of his albums. I also follow Daft Punk, who's a dance band. I don't have a lot of their stuff, but I do like, I think it was the debut album and a couple of the tracks that float in and around there. They did a Tron soundtrack, which I really, really enjoyed. But basically, the instrumental stuff that Daft Punk does, I really like. I don't care when they started mixing it up with vocalists and things like that. Lucas Wilson wants to know, what are your favorite newer glam metal bands from the modern era? First one up being Nestor. I've talked a lot about them recently, only just recently got turned on to them. In fact, last week, they put out a brand new album, but this one here being the debut album, which is called Kids in a Ghost Town is the title of this one. And so far, still liking this one better than the newest one. Not that the new one isn't great, but fantastic band that was around in the early 90s and didn't get signed or put out an album, and then reformed 30 years later to do that. A group called King Cobra. And I don't know much about this band, but the lead vocalist, Eric St. Michael, I think has been around in some other bands and then put this thing together here. But he's sort of the old school guy with some newer, younger guys in there doing this. And one that just came out this year, Rock City Machine Company, who is a band known for having backed up Gene Simmons of Kiss and currently the backing band for Ace Frehley and his solo tours. And this album is fantastic stuff. So lots and lots of good stuff out there. I've definitely been finding as of late within the last year a lot of great newer rock bands that I don't feel were around. They're definitely more reminiscent of that 80s style sound than any time prior to now. William Levin asks, what is your favorite Flotsam and Jetsam album? And that would go to Quattro. Part and parcel to the fact that I met the band. You can see the signatures on here. Was also the first Flotsam and Jetsam album I got. I saw the video a lot on Headbangers Ball at the time on MTV called Swatting at Flies. So a lot of good memories tied into this, but probably biggest is just having met the band. So always enjoyed that. Now, Hub Rigel is asking why Love Beach by ELP is my favorite from them. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, a lot of other people. I do love Trilogy and the debut album. But I think the reason I like this one best is that the tracks that are on here, in my opinion, are more song oriented. They're not more reminiscent of, say, the Nutcracker or some of those other classical pieces that had been integrated into their stuff. When I listen to this, it has a more proggy feel of songs to me. But I don't know. I didn't grow up with ELP, so in terms of buying their albums, when I got this one, it just clicked immediately. Whereas some of the other things that I have from them, it's hit or miss. But I don't know. I know this is a least favorite by most ELP fans, so I can understand why I've been asked actually several times about why this is my favorite one. I did a Let's Go to the Record Store and I commented it was my favorite album, and everybody was just kind of mind blown from it. I got a lot of questions there, but I don't know that I answered it, so answering it here. Okay, Michael Harrison. Is there an album that you like that you've never been able to get on CD? And there'd probably be this one here, Buckingham Nicks. So luckily one of my viewers made me a copy and sent this to me, but only ever available on LP. It's been out of print for ages, probably never will be back in print, having a lot to do with the fact that Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks would go on to join Fleetwood Mac. I think they did not want it to compete, but it's never had an official release on CD, and so never been able to get one. That's just a burn copy that someone made for me. All right, Sean Morrison, who is someone who always tells me to have a nice weekend every Friday when I post my music news roundup. So thank you, Sean. I always appreciate that. Wants to know, do you find it, or how do you find it odd when a band has more compilation albums than studio albums? And I do. There are a number of bands out there. I think Scorpions come to mind, and the Rolling Stones are one. Now, the Rolling Stones been around 60 years, so you can have a lot of compilations when you've been around that long. But what I don't like is a band like Aerosmith, where they haven't made an album in more than a decade or so, but they will put out a compilation. And then 5 years later, no new material, put out another compilation. And 5 years after that, put out another one. And it just gets repetitive. It's the same songs every time. They don't mix it up. Queen, who does have a lot of compilations at least, began mixing it up doing, they had one that was called Queen Rocks, and it was all rock songs, no ballads on it. They did one that was Rare Cuts. They did 3 volumes of songs that were rare. Or not when I say rare, but I mean they were like album cuts, so they were not the hit songs. They have the greatest hits, and they had ones called like Classic Queen and a few others like those, but they don't really duplicate the greatest hits. They have stayed with what those are and have chosen to do some other versions of. They've done the ballads, they've done other sort of theme related collections, Queen Plus, where it's Queen with other people guesting with them, that sort of stuff. So if you're going to do a lot of compilations, at least have different themes. Don't just repeat and release the same stuff over and over. A lot of times, though, that is record labels doing it, and it's not the bands. So, it's hit or miss. All right, that Peter Boy asks, are you a completist or do you cherry pick the albums you buy? And I would actually say I'm both. I'm definitely a completist. If I love the band, I'm going to get everything that they do. But then there's other bands that I don't need everything, and so I do cherry pick. But even with those bands, when I'm first starting out and I don't know that I'm going to be buying everything by them, I start by cherry picking, and I purchase this one that I like, and then I find another one that I like, and so forth. And then at a certain point, I may get to a point where I say, I'm now just going to complete the collection because I like them so much. I never buy everything just to have the collection if I don't like it. What will happen is I will buy all the studio albums, and then at some point I really want more by that band and there's nothing more to get. So I might buy a compilation or a live album or something like that. And I eventually get to the point of completing it. But I never set out with the idea that I must buy every album released by that band. There are a few instances, even with Motley Crue and Pink Floyd, where these bands have additional compilations or things out there that I don't need in my collection, and so there's just not part of it. But yeah, for the most part, I call myself a completist. Thrasher asks the question, what do you think is the worst thing about CD collecting? And interestingly, I just recently filmed this as a video topic, so there is a whole discussion about it that I did with Anthony as part of the Sound Exchange sessions. But I would say that the biggest thing for me is that there's always one more thing to buy. You're never done. Even when you think you have found everything from your favorite band or everything from a particular genre, there's always going to be something more. So, the task is never done. It's both the blessing and the curse, so to speak. Alex Kennedy asks, what album got the strongest emotional reaction from you when you first heard it? And I would probably go back to what I said about Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. When I first heard this, it started off with hearing the song Welcome to the Jungle. It was being played as sort of a battle of the bands kind of thing, pairing up against a new band every night. And this one here was just like nothing I had ever heard. And ultimately, when I finally got the album, it was the same thing. No other band sounded like this. There became, after this, a lot of bands that tried to emulate it, but I also don't think there's ever been a band that has really ever captured the grit, the sleaze, the griminess, the dirtiness of it, and yet the full-on rocking of this album the way that Guns N' Roses was able to do. So this one here just absolutely moved me in a way that was unheard of. It was why I had to go out and buy it. As before that, it was just albums were being given to me. I was listening to stuff, but I didn't need to buy it. But heard this, had to go get it. Nicholas Network asks, is there a genre of music you weren't really into but are now? And I don't know, I'm not like overly into this, but I was never into soft rock or yacht rock. And about a year or so ago, I sort of discovered some bands that fell in that category, and bands that I never really would have listened to before, like Christopher Cross. And I didn't realize Steely Dan was considered part of that. So when I found out that some bands I already listened to fell into the category, and then England Dan, I try to think of some of the other ones offhand, but I started to find some of these bands that I did enjoy, even though it was a softer rock style thing. And so now definitely much more open to that style of music than I ever have been before. All right, next up, Reckless Rock Reviews. Are there any genres that you've tried but can't really get into? Certainly, I talk about it all the time, actually, by saying, because people ask, I'm not into death metal, black metal, or any of that sort of stuff. It just doesn't move me. I can't get into death metal mostly because of the vocals, and the black metal or any of those other sort of ones that lean towards the satanistic style singing, lyrical content, whatever. It just doesn't move me. Sure, I do listen to some bands that cover a bit of that, like Slayer. But for the most part, I just can't do the Cookie Monster style vocals. I also don't get into most forms of pop and dance music, although there is some stuff from that I would call more new wave that does fall into the dance category. And I did mention that I like, Daft Punk, and there's a few other synth pop bands that are out there that I do get into. But yeah, death metal, black metal, mostly that kind of stuff I can't get into. Rob Rose, do you listen to country? I do. I certainly don't follow it the way that I do, say, rock and metal music, but I listen to Johnny Cash. I mean, who doesn't? Garth Brooks. I do like Billy Ray Cyrus, Martina McBride, Lori Morgan. There's a number of them in the early 90s when country became popular. I dated a girl that was into country, so I listened to a lot of it there and found that I did actually enjoy it. And that's kind of when country became more rock than traditional country, and the more rock country I certainly can get into. I don't really follow it or get into any bands that do it today, although there are some more modern day country bands or folk bands that I have been able to get into. And so I get into a little bit of it here and there, but Sean Smith and the Saints is a modern one that I listen to. Okay, Ben White asks, are there any bands or artists that you follow that are outside of the music community that you portray here on the channel? And Neil Diamond would be one of them. This was the first album I picked up from him, Tennessee Moon, which was actually a country album. He had done country stuff before, certainly, but Neil Diamond known for doing rock, among other things. Always been a fan of his, mostly because my mom turned me on to him, so there's really good memories tied up in that, but just love his vocals. And someone else that I follow that I don't really think gets the traction whenever I talk about it, but I do bring it up here. John Carpenter, who does movie soundtracks for his own movies back in the day to like Halloween, The Fog, Escape from New York, stuff like that. But after he retired from making movies, started just making music. And this one here called Lost Themes 2. There's a bunch of these out there. I think he's got 4 of these now. Still continues to make that sort of synth pop style stuff that was from the 80s. And I love that sound of music. It's like the stuff they use in Stranger Things, if you're familiar with that. So I love that. I follow along. I'm a diehard fan. I've gone and seen John Carpenter in concert even. And then, of course, also those country artists I mentioned before. So there are other artists that I follow that I don't really talk about on the channel all that much. Colin Push asks, what is the oldest item in your collection? And I've got an Elvis Presley 1956 album. That's as far back as I could come up with. I've also got some Jerry Lee Lewis and definitely Beatles stuff and Doors, but we're moving into the 60s, so I was trying to get back before the 60s and see what I have, in the collection. I think that is the oldest thing that I have. Pete Dixon and that Peter Boy asked, do you prefer jewel cases or digipacks? And these people must not watch my channel very long, because yes, I absolutely prefer jewel cases over digipacks. Most people out there know I rail against it all the time. Really, it comes down to jewel cases. If this cracks, I can change it out. When this gets dented, damaged, creased, worn, I can't replace this. I have to go buy a brand new one. So I prefer the jewel case that I can change out. This I cannot. Although this cracks far easier than this, which can take a bit more of a beating and not crack, obviously, because it's cardboard. But when it gets dented, there's just nothing you can do. So yeah, jewel cases. Plus, I got a nostalgic vibe for those. That's what I grew up with. There was only jewel cases originally. In fact, when digipacks first came out in the very early 90s, I loved them because they were like limited edition things, and I snapped those up at that time. And then it became the alternative, where now most things are digipack or cardboard cases, and it's very rare we're getting jewel cases. In fact, when things come out as a jewel case, they sell it like it's this return of nostalgia, like, oh, and featuring jewel case edition. All right, KWS fan asks, have you ever gotten rid of an album and wish you hadn't? Yes, it has happened so many times. Not a lot recently, because I just don't get rid of things now. I haven't gotten rid of things, for at least a decade or longer. But when I was younger and I didn't have money to go out and buy new stuff, and I wanted something, I would gather up 10 or 20 CDs that I wasn't listening to, take it to my local record store, get cash for it, and then buy that new thing that I wanted, get some new music. And it was just how things were done. And then as I got older and I'd go, oh, I wish I really hadn't sold that. I want to get that again. And I started noticing that a lot more. Plus I started to make more money, having graduated college and getting a real job and not doing, the after school type jobs that you don't get paid very much for. And so it was, well, suddenly I had more money to spend and I didn't necessarily need to sell things. When I was in college, I mean, there were times I had to sell CDs to make ends meet to be able to feed myself. And that was always a great source to be able to pull from when you had to do it. But yeah, I just don't do it anymore and sit on it because I know somewhere down the road I will wish that I had that. Leon Ziegler asks, what is the worst show you have ever seen? The only thing that really came to mind was Jefferson Starship. I saw them in this, sit down and eat at restaurant kind of place, which I'd been to before. And then shows are okay there, but nothing great. Not like, you don't really want to see a band at a restaurant. You want to see them with a full crowd. But they were just so out of tune, out of sync with each other. It was the sloppiest playing, and I know they've never been one for very tight performances, and it's part of the shtick, and the vocals are always a little out of tune or a little out of sync. I mean, I get that too, but this was just really off. And then I listened to some other live recordings from around that time frame, and it's just the way they were. It was not an off night. They just got that way in the years as they got older and older and older. So Mika asks, do artists' bad behavior ever affect your decision to buy albums? I don't know if it affects my decision to buy albums. He referenced John Schaefer and the issues that came up with him partaking in the January 6th issue, writing at the Capitol, that kind of stuff. I already owned Iced Earth albums. I'm not going to get rid of my Iced Earth albums. It's left a bad taste in my mouth. But, the funny thing is that it's been long enough now. He's, done his time. He's paid his dues, so to speak. If he came out and started doing something again, I'd probably buy it and listen to it. It's a little different where Ted Nugent has a political view that I don't have, and when he spews that sort of stuff, it can really rub me the wrong way, and it'll make me not want to listen to the music. But again, I've never sold his stuff, and I just had to stop listening to the things that he has said online. And with enough time, it took about 4 years or so, I pulled out a while back, I pulled out a whole bunch of Ted Nugent and was just really digging it because I've been a fan of his music for a very long time. I just don't like when artists start bringing too much politics into things. Everyone's allowed to have their own opinions and stuff, but sometimes the stuff that gets said doesn't need to be said, and that can rub me the wrong way. So fortunately, there aren't any other bands out there or artists that have really done something negative or bad, or if they have been accused of something, it's never really been, proven to know definitively, where I should stand on it. But I did do a whole topic on this called When Music Artists Go Bad, What Should Fans Do? So I discussed that at that time, and it is a catch-22. Do you continue to support them because you're a fan of theirs, or do you not because you don't agree with what it is that they're currently doing? I don't know, and it should be for each person individually to figure out for themselves, and no one should be telling that person whether they can or cannot listen to something. All right, this next one I got asked a whole bunch of times. Some of the people that asked were Richard S., Biscayne Boy, and Spaghetti Lee, who happens to be one of my very early subscribers. Somewhere around the early 200s, he jumped on board. So thank you for being one of those early people that supported me. Wants to know why I don't go see live shows anymore. And yeah, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of live shows. So many different bands, multiple times, 4 or 5 times a piece for a lot of my favorite artists. I haven't seen anyone since right around the pandemic was the last time I went and saw anyone. And most of it comes down to cost. Cost today, just too much. I just can't see spending that kind of money. It's not that I don't have the money. I can't see shelling out that kind of money for a few hour long experience. Also, because there's so many annoying people at concerts these days. There's just a lot of jerks and people that get drunk and they're annoying, hollering, hooting, kicking the back of the seat, blocking your view, spilling beers, just whatever it might be. I have found myself over the last few years that I was going to shows, going home very annoyed by my experience, not the band, but my experience. And when the pandemic rolled around and I stopped going to shows, I kind of said to myself, why am I going? If I'm not having a good time and I'm being annoyed by people and I'm not able to relax and enjoy myself, why am I shelling out these hundreds and hundreds of dollars to go see these bands that I used to see for 10, 15, or $20? I mean, I saw Guns N' Roses in 1991 for under $20. And then when I saw them on the reunion tour in 2016 or 17, it was $350. Yet my tickets for $20 were far better seats than they were when I paid $350. So I started to think about things like that, and it's really just come down to not being able to bring myself to spend the money, and I don't really want to get annoyed. But it's been about 4 years. I'm itching to see some bands, and I may eventually start going and doing it. I live in a new place around a lot of new venues that I haven't checked out, so I may start doing it. I'll never say never, but at least right now I just don't feel the need to do it, and that's just kind of the rationale behind it. All right, and Sindri Hansen asks, how much do you think about you've been, or sorry, how much do you think you have paid for your collection and how much do you think it's worth? Honestly, I have no idea how much I've spent on my musical collection over the years. I mean, 35 years of collecting, I've just never kept track of it, and I'm not even going to venture an idea. I probably could have bought a house for the amount of money that I spent on it. As far as what it's valued at, I have a rough estimate. I mentioned that I started putting my stuff into Discogs, and I stopped around, album 300, 350, somewhere in that range. And so what I did was took the dollar amount that had come up with, and I did some math to calculate what it would be based on the 12,000 and find a rough estimate of it. And I used the median line, not the high, not the low, the right in the middle line of it. And so my collection would be valued somewhere around $350,000 today. I don't think I would ever see that for this collection, nor would I ever want to sell it. If someone showed up and said, I'll give you $350,000 for your music collection, I would say, hell no. It brings me far too much joy to ever part with. I have done episodes with Anthony talking about whether or not we would ever sell our collections. He's kind of up for it. One of the people that guested during that episode, Mitchell, said he has done it several times before. I don't know. I just couldn't do it. But I also don't need the money. I think if I was in a position where I needed the money, I'd probably have a different tune about it. But I work a very good job. As I said, I'm an architect. I went to school for this. I did, about 7, 8 years worth of college. And I've worked my way up through the firm that I'm in. So I am very fortunate to make a good living, and I can afford to spend a significant amount of money on my music, which I think later on in here, there's a personal question that has me touching on that. But that wraps up music. We just did 30 questions. There is one channel related question from Mark Smith who asked, do you ask permission before filming in a record store? And no, I don't. Probably should. It might be the polite thing to do, but in New York City, nobody cares. And with all the tours, people are filming and taking pictures. And with social media today, everybody's streaming or going live or doing something. Nobody really thinks twice about it. And so I just do it. I have gone into a couple stores. One in particular, a guy got mad at me because I didn't ask. And I sort of said, hey, if you don't want the free promotion, then fine, I won't do it. And then the guy changed his tune very quickly. Most stores just might see me doing it, not ask, and then at the very end, as I'm ringing up, they'll ask me what it is that I was doing or why I was filming, and I fill them in on who I am and my channel and that sort of stuff. But I don't want to go in and ask for permission and be told no. I'd rather be filming and then be told I can't film and address the situation, but hopefully have made enough footage that I get the video that I want out of it. And, I guess that's selfish of me, but no, I don't ask for permission. I think that if you're a public store and you're open to the public, then you shouldn't really care. And you really can't dictate filming and non-filming. They can ask me to leave, I guess, but, whatever. Okay, personal questions, 10 of them here. Andrew Mikado asks, since you said you have older brothers who got you into music, are they still into music the same way you are? My older brothers were never into music the way that I was. They were never music fiends like me. They got me into it only in that I was exposed to music because they played music, but not because they were music fans. So it's not really, I don't really see them getting me into music. I would have gotten into music. I probably got into music actually through one of my best friends that I grew up with who was a music collector. I was already a fan of some music bands, but it was with him that I actually started music collecting. We enjoyed it, and it would be like, hey, let's go to the record store. And that became a normal thing for us. So I really should probably credit that guy for getting me into music collecting. But my older brothers, I just experienced music through, and that's some of my first memories. But no, I don't really think they follow music at all anyway, and it's certainly not like I do. And the question also is, am I close with my brothers? Unfortunately, I am not. I don't want to get into it really here, but there's a falling out years ago for a number of different things that no one's really ever going to be able to fix. And unfortunately, we are aware of each other. We kind of know what's going on, but they don't really make the effort, and it's not for lack of trying on my part, but it just isn't going to happen at this stage, and that's okay. I've come to terms with it, so I still have a sister, I still have a mom who I keep in touch with, and we share things, so that's great. Okay, Off and Running asks, did your mom ever put a limit on how many albums you could buy a month? No, because it was always my money. It hadn't, she was never giving me money to go out and buy albums. So the limit was simply however much money I earned, either through my allowance or when I eventually got a job, after school job, that kind of stuff. But no, fortunately, she never said, you're spending too much money on music or anything like that. My mom has always supported my love of music. And part of that great memory about going to the record store, the Megadeth listening party for Countdown to Extinction, was that I was sitting there at like 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night listening on the radio that was broadcasting the event live, and my mom came in and wanted to know what I was doing, and I said, well, I'm listening to this thing, and then she just turns to me and says, do you want to go to it? And we jumped in the car and she drove me up so I could go be there in person. But that's part of that great memory, and just one of the great things that my mom has always done, meaning the supporting of my love for music. Mr. Arkyle asks, how is your mom liking the move to New Jersey? And I got a couple people who asked this question. I don't remember who the others were, but yeah, my mom has dug it. She moved in about 1.5 years ago after I completed the renovation that I did after purchasing this house 2 years ago. And she's been moved in. She loves it here. She's glad she made the change, and I'm glad to have her here with me. So long that I lived here in New York City where I wasn't able to go home as much as I would like. And now having her here, we certainly get to spend more time together, and that's a wonderful thing. And also wants to know, do I set aside a certain amount of money per month, or do I just buy what I want? And this is the question I was thinking about a few minutes back, where I was talking about having, a good job, fortunately, and I make a good income so that I can just buy what I want. So I do not set aside a certain amount of money. There was a time period where I used to sort of say I only wanted to spend X amount of dollars per month, but that was really just to make it so that I didn't, go into debt buying music. But I've long since surpassed that. And I now can afford what I'm buying, and I just buy it, and I never have to worry about whether I'm gonna, run short at the end of the month or anything like that. And it's a nice thing. It's a nice feeling to have, and I know not everybody can afford to do that, but I also worked very hard to be where I am. And so I should be able to take advantage of it, and I do. I like being able to take some of that hard work that I have, put into my job and everything, and put it back into my passion. Chillin' Like a Villain asks, when you meet new people, do you bring up that you're a music collector? And actually, no. I talk about other things. I have far more interest than just being a music collector. Most people are not music collectors. So for me to tell them that, it isn't going to suddenly turn into some big conversation. But also, I don't immediately tell people that I run a YouTube channel either. I sort of let that come up organically. In most cases, those people find me because a lot of people, I guess, Google people that they meet and then find out that I'm, run a YouTube channel, but I don't bring that kind of stuff up. Julio Jack Bravo and Andrew Beck, among other people, asked, what are your favorite non-music related movies and TV shows? So movies, my favorite all-time movie is Midnight Run with Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin. If you've never seen it, check it out. It's a movie out of the 80s. I don't know why I love it as much as I do. But that's one of those movies that anytime it's on TV or I just don't know what to watch, I could throw that on. I've seen it hundreds of times and I still love it today. I'm going to talk a little bit more about why I love this movie later on, but Apollo 13, which of course is about the real astronaut experience going into space and the you know damage that was done to the craft and the harrowing attempts to bring them home. And then the movie The Martian, Matt Damon movie about being stuck on Mars. So I love those movies. Movie franchises that I like: Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Marvel. I love action adventure, and I love ones that have a bit of that comedy to it. So there's both drama and comedy within the movie. And as far as TV shows, it's the same sort of thing, the sort of action adventure with a bit of comedy in it. So the TV show Castle, and then when that one got canceled, Nathan Fillion, the actor from it, got a new TV show, The Rookie, which I really enjoy. I've enjoyed TV shows like NCIS, and which wasn't a spinoff, but when one of the cast members left and got a new show, Bull. And then currently streaming, binging the TV show Scorpion. So yeah, definitely enjoying those. Next up, Pete Dixon and That Peter Boy wants to know, what is that pointy thing that sits behind you? That thing behind me is a Bluetooth speaker. And I was given that to do a review on it. So it was a company that reached out to me and wanted to collab with me and have me do a review, which I did. You can find that in a playlist that I've got. I think it's called Collaborations or product reviews, probably product reviews. And I do a whole thing, talking about that, and I can pair up, anything Bluetooth with it, like my phone or whatever. That's a fantastic, beautiful sound. It's like, those Bose kind of speakers that don't look like anything, but then the sound that comes out of them is amazing. And it just looks so cool. I have it sitting there. I used to have box sets sitting on that trunk behind me. And I just love the way this thing looks so much that I put it there. It's also just nice to have some sound in this room when I want it. All right, Stephen Michael Adams and Jeff Shalika asks, other than music, what are some other things that bring you joy? All right, so I had a lot of people ask me about my cat Noodle. He is currently sleeping somewhere. I thought, if he was around or present, I'd even try to show him, to you guys in here, but he's not a very photogenic or on-camera cat. Most of you guys know that even if he's in the background, when I start talking, he'll walk away. He is 7 years old. Somebody asked who is his favorite artist. It's Cat Stevens. I don't listen to it very often because it's not my cup of tea, but he certainly loves him a lot. Not so much since he changed his name, but he really, really enjoyed him when he was named Cat Stevens. Other things that I enjoy that bring me joy besides my cat, and yes, that was the top thing on my list. Painting. I like to paint. Talked about that briefly, but I have always done art, drawing, painting, stuff like that. Probably stems back to why I became an architect as well. I love history, which I think is also why I do love music and why I'm always giving you guys the history of a band and the spin-offs and the side projects and all that sort of stuff, because that is where my interest lies within a lot of those things. But I enjoy just regular history of life and, the United States and world history and that sort of stuff. So going to museums, visiting historical sites, I love stuff like that. And then I mentioned this would become more apparent as to why I like the movies Apollo 13 and The Martian, because I like space and I'm a big proponent of going to Mars, and I follow Elon Musk and NASA and all these different people and companies that are trying to make space an affordable thing, space travel, and do a commercial ventures out of it and stuff. Because it's sort of like with the advent of the computer and the internet, both of those, when turned over to the general public, found a way to not only make them profitable, but to make them usable and finding uses for them for the average everyday person. I think space will be exactly the same way. So when it was in the hands of the government agencies like NASA, we didn't really make a lot of progress. But ever since the corporations and individuals have gotten involved with it, like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson and people like that, we've made leaps and bounds far faster than NASA has in almost 50 years since not going back to the moon. We're finally doing that, and I don't think we'd be doing that by NASA if it wasn't for all these other corporations that have been doing it. So I think that's the best thing to ever happen to space are these corporations that are getting involved with it now. All right, and the last question here at 50 minutes in, I don't even know if this is a real serious question or not, but hey, the person wanted to know, and I thought I'll just end with it. Robbie Rib asks, what is my favorite flavor of chicken wings? And actually, I don't like chicken wings, so that is the part I always skip. If there is a leg in there, I might eat it, but even then, not my favorite. I don't like gooey, messy things like that, having to eat with my fingers. But I like chicken fingers, and I tend to just like the plain breaded ones. I don't really like sauces. When I eat things, burgers, whatever it might be, I like to taste the flavor of the meat, how it's seasoned. So I don't generally like to put ketchup, mustard, barbecue sauce, whatever it might be, on those things. I want to just taste them as they are. So that's kind of one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of wings. But hey, I'll eat them at gatherings and events, and yeah. Oh, there you go. 40 viewer asked questions and then some. Hopefully you guys are glad you asked these questions, especially that last one, right? And all in all, I did this, I put this together as a big thank you, having just hit the 22,000 subscriber mark. So again, thank you to all my viewers. Thank you to those subscribers that did subscribe and have helped me build this channel. I really, really do appreciate the support. But more than that, it's the community that we have built here. And I love having found a place that we can all, come together and share our love of music. And, I was so sort of alone and I didn't have friends that did this sort of thing. And from creating the channel, not only have I found friends, actual, real, honest to goodness friends, but I just found that there's other people in the world that feel the same way that I do about it. And, I'm very thankful for that, and certainly thankful for you guys being here and watching. And we'll do more of these things. I know you guys always enjoy them when I happen. I don't do them too often, but I do like to put these out to sort of keep you guys just in the loop, little things about me. All right, everyone, until next time, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.